But when I launch Hootsuite, which is a web-based app, it's not on my desktop, first thing I look at are mentions, because every one of those mentions needs to be acknowledged. Because every time I acknowledge those mentions, whoever I'm acknowledging has a warm, fuzzy feeling about me, because I'm a good neighbor. And they're the people who are going to retweet me when I need them to retweet a message. If I have a big project going on, I need to have as many people willing to get my message out as possible. And there are hundreds of different kinds of third-party apps you can get to gauge your effectiveness on Twitter. And the big one right now is called Clout. And the last time I pulled a Clout report on myself, Clout told me that when I have a message, there is an 84% chance that someone will retweet it. Which is really
by the way,
high.
I really hate that.
That's really high, and that's really good. And it also makes me a big target for public relations agencies, for publishers, for product manufacturers, because they know if they can get a message in front of me, people are going to read it and they're going to retweet it. So yeah, let's fly him to Spain for 8 days on a trade mission. And you know, things like that happen to me shockingly regularly, and it's all from active use of these tools. But Hootsuite lets me manage everything from that spot. It's not just Twitter. I also can run my Facebook account, and I also do a lot of social media consultancies, and I run a couple of other Twitter accounts, not as me, for money. You know, people pay me to tweet on behalf of their company or brand, and I can manage all of that through that one screen. So rather than having to log in and out of Twitter as all these IDs, I can go to Hootsuite and they're all lined up in tabs. I can say, okay, right now, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to be, you know, whoever, surf style. And for 5 minutes, I get to play that character, and then I jump back to me, and then I go to another one. And probably, all told, I'm on Twitter via Hootsuite for about an hour a day. About a half an hour in the morning, half hour at night. I check in throughout the day, but I try to keep it manageable, because it's easy to spend all day, especially when you start building a community. There's an urgency to it, because you want to respond to people immediately, but you just can't. You have to have a life. So, and people understand that. So Hootsuite is a really powerful tool for me to do my best practices as I define them, not as they were arbitrarily defined for me, but as I figured this stuff out, as I figured out how to integrate it into my life. Hootsuite's as important a tool in my arsenal as is my blog interface. So Twitter is all about relationships. Twitter, it's not a numbers game. You know, people make this big production out of, oh, I have 20,000 followers. Well, that's great. How do you interact with 20,000 people? You know, I have 2,200, which is plenty. And at 2,200, I can barely keep up with it. And at some point, you need to make a decision. Do you want to be a super Twitterer with 100,000 followers that you can't interact with? Or do you want to concentrate your efforts on building a smaller community? And for me, the way my life worked and the way my Twitter career has worked out, it made more sense for me to limit the number of people I interact with, because I want a legitimate interaction. You know, I don't want to be popular necessarily. I want to be effective. So, you know, good Twitter etiquette is good blogging etiquette. You know, be kind above all. You know, be kind, be generous, be nice, retweet other people's messages, and listen. One of the surest ways to turn people off is to never acknowledge anybody else, or to only talk about what you want to talk about. You know, read other people's stuff, follow their links, read their blogs, leave comments. You know, just be nice, be a good citizen, be a good neighbor. And all of this stuff, whether it's blogs or Facebook or Twitter or Foursquare or any of these other forums that are out there, they all, you get out of them directly what you put into them. None of this is automatic. None of it is fast. Building communities takes time. It takes effort. But it's worth it. It is so worth it. You know, there are few things as rewarding as far as I'm concerned. I have regular pen pal relationships with people all over the world. I was telling my parents after I got back from one of my trips this winter that I don't think there's a capital in the world where I don't know someone I could meet for dinner. And that wasn't true 3 years ago. You know, I remember coming to trade shows, and I would go to a trade show, walk the trade show floor all day long, and go back to my hotel room and be in bed at 10. And now when I go to a trade show, I get bum's rushed. There aren't enough hours. I can't see everybody. I can't go to all the events that I get invited to. It's a really good problem to have. So, and again, consistency. Acknowledge every kindness and extend more courtesies than you get. Have people like you because you're generous, and it pays off hugely. You know, again, back to retweeting other people's messages. When you do that often enough, people start to feel obligated to do the same back. And these are amazingly powerful platforms. They reach huge audiences if you want them to, but they can also be local at the same time. If you don't want to be, you know, this superstar like Dominique,
listening to every word.
No, if you don't want to be a global force, if you don't want to be a national figure, if you just want to be local, you know, you want everybody in your region to know who you are, you can keep this stuff really local too. It doesn't have to be gigantic. It's very controllable. And so that's where we ended up on my abbreviated. That thing I just went through is the meat of the seminar that I teach. So y'all just saved about $1,500.
We're going to open up the floor for questions, and I'm going to repeat the question because we are recording this for people who aren't able to be here today. So if you ask a question, I'll repeat it, and please say whether it's for anyone in particular.
I'm not sure if it's for anyone in particular, because I'm sure you all have experience with this. Let's see, I write about animal policy, I write articles, old school straight journalism, even though I have strong opinions, I try to keep them out of it, don't know if I succeed. I interview both sides of every story as often as possible. Most of my readers, however, seem to be on the animal protection side of things, and that's where I seem to have the most Facebook friends and so forth. I don't know, sorry I'm not doing Twitter yet, but after today I guess I will. So I can't really join the rah-rah, oh isn't it horrible what E6 Cattle Company did to those calves in Texas last week. I can't come out and say things like that. At least I don't feel that I can. So I find myself, I feel I'm making pretty anemic comments in response, like, thank you so much, your opinion is really interesting, or you know, something like that. Any ideas on whether or not that's okay, or?
The question was, is there any advice from any of the panelists as to whether not becoming embroiled in certain issues is okay if you're just trying to keep your blog following happy?
Right.
Is that good?
Yeah, very good.
Who wants to dive in?
Well, I'm happy to dive in with that. I think it's fine, but you know, it also depends on your goal in running this blog. First of all, I think thank you, that's really interesting, is absolutely fine.
Okay.
And people don't necessarily expect more. But the other thing is, you want to get people talking to each other. You may be able to answer every single comment, but if you can't, it's really important that your commenters are talking to one another too.
Right.
And you can get a lot of interesting conversation going by saying, oh, that's really interesting, Sarah, what do you think? Because you've written about this before, and kind of get it going. I like what you said about the community. I now feel that my blog is like my office. I have editorial meetings, and there are people who come back over and over and who comment, and I know their personalities. I have an idea of what they look like even, and I love to hear those voices. It's like a little dinner party or something.
May I ask a quick follow-up? You brought up a question. As you can imagine, animal issues are highly emotional, and there often are, you know, kind of some scuffles between commenters. is it my responsibility to try to smooth things over, or?
Everybody is highly emotional about everything, don't worry.
But to answer your follow-up, just briefly, I don't moderate my comments, and I really let them go, because I realized a long time ago that they're not necessarily about me.
Yeah.
So I do egg people on. I'm not horribly provocative, but what Dominique said about acknowledging other commenters and encouraging this back and forth thing is brilliant, because it's really true. People want to be roped in, and you know, it's important to remember that blogging isn't journalism, and a lot of people have a hard time making that transition.
Yeah,
as
I'm
far as
definitely not blogging, it's
yeah,
articles.
right. It's first person, and you know, people want an opinion, and if you know comments erupt that get ugly, I will jump it back in, and I say, you know, everyone's voice is allowed to be heard here. You know, we don't shout, we don't call names, we don't get personal, and people tend to behave if you intervene. You just have to intervene, and when people abuse, you know, the policies and things like that, I'll block them. You can always unblock them later, but sometimes people don't add anything to the conversation, and they really don't belong being there. And you're allowed to say no.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I wanted to ask a question on behalf of those of us who are sort of old school journalists struggling to make these transitions. I understand the wonderful social aspects that you described. Dinner in every capital sounds like fun. I totally get the promotional help this offers you when you have a book in the offing, but I'm worried about both the sort of the distraction if you're trying to do serious long form work like a book, or alternately to make a living doing traditional pitching and people are paying you 5-6 days a week to do work. How do you decide to allot your time? Is it really worth it? When does it become necessary and desirable to do all this blogging and tweeting?
So the question is, as a traditional journalist with lots on your plate in terms of making a living, how do you make the decision about what to pull away from in your work life in order to support the social media life? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Talk to this question, because it's right up your alley.
Well, I've been a print journalist for almost 20 years now, and my niche was design and architecture. And I still write as a journalist. I still have editors that I write for on a pretty consistent basis. And I decided to jump into the new media when the print started melting down in late 2009,
Right.
2008, 2009. And I saw that my life as a journalist was going to change. There was just no two ways about it, because I was losing a lot of publications that I'd been depending upon for income over many years. And I started by experimenting with different blogs, design blogs, architecture blogs, doing the social media thing, trying to connect with the big community online that would kind of help me transition over. The interesting thing is, I have never really turned blogging or social media into a pay model in terms of ads or being paid as a blogger. The money just has not been there, and I've tried it. I'm an examiner. I have an examiner page, penny per click. It's disgusting, but you know it
Not
is.
even.
But you know, it is one of the ways that you can kind of experiment your way through what's going to happen in terms of a career. The interesting thing for me is that I began enjoying social media so much that now I've turned it into my business as a social media consultant.
Okay. All right,
So there are.
but let's say you don't want to be a social media consultant. You're a journalist who's interested in the arts or cars or design, whatever.
There is no easy answer to that.
Right.
I don't believe, and
Yeah.
someone else who has a different opinion can
Right.
correct me, because
Is your concern that